Good evening and a very warm welcome to Television Tonga's news package for tonight. Making headlines, special cabinet meeting approves for reconstruction work for homes damaged by Tropical Cyclone Ian in the Hawaii begin this year. Residents in 4 districts still in shock of the cyclone, hindering the recovery process. And cargo vessel called the Punale, which is owned by the Wata Shipping Lines, caught on fire. These and more stories later on in this bulletin, together with the latest in sports and the weather forecast. I'm Fatai Fenga with your news for tonight. His Majesty King Leopold VI has officially named an area at the Lokupo Beach in Ewa, to Fa'anga. Radio and Television Tonga news stringer in Ewa, Setaleki Tukia, says His Majesty officially named the area yesterday afternoon when he asked one of his talking chiefs, Wakalahi, to stop and rest there. Lokupo and Tofa'anga are both located on His Majesty's estate in Homa, Ewa. According to Setaleki Tukia, the escorts built a temporary shelter for His Majesty to rest in overnight before he returned to the Royal Palace, Heilalatangtangi. He adds that Lord Luani and Honourable Sione Kamawhana Tukuaho have both arrived on the island this morning. A special cabinet meeting which was held yesterday has agreed to begin a reconstruction work on homes that were badly damaged by Tropical Cyclone Ian before the end of the year. The Honourable Acting Prime Minister, who's also the Chairman of the National Emergency Management Committee, Sami Vaipulu, confirmed this to Television Tonga News. Kalistu Nuku has more on that story.
The Chairman of the National Emergency Committee, Honourable Sami Vaipulu, says Cabinet also approved for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is responsible for seeking foreign aid for the Hawaii group of islands, to do so. Cabinet has approved to carry out the construction of houses by the end of the year. We don't want people to live in tents for long. To date, requests have been made to foreign donor partners and they are still awaiting a reply. The Cabinet meeting also approved the commencement of registration of allotment in Hawaii, and they're also pleased with an initial survey carried out by the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries and Food in conjunction with the Food and Agriculture Organization. The team was commended for a job well done in regards to the initial survey. It was also agreed that the World Bank begin its survey on the damages caused by Tropical Cyclone Ian throughout the Hawaii group of islands from January 30th to February 4th. The Cabinet members also agreed that the schools on the island starts its academic year as usual and not be pushed back. Furthermore, the Tonga National Youth Congress will establish a distillation of seawater at Foa Maungaone in Ha'ano. The necessary equipment was shipped last night from the Tonga Water Board to Hawaii. According to Mr. Vaipulu, more water supply will be donated from Vava'u among other equipment, while other donations are delivered from Tongatapu. Reporting for Television Tonga News, I'm Kalisi Tuyonuku.
The government of Japan and the United States of America have pledged to assist the victims of Tropical Cyclone Ian in a Hawaii group of islands in any way they can to help in the recovery process for the islands. Information from the Japanese ambassador's office in Nuku'alofa says the government has decided to extend emergency relief goods worth 13 million yen to Hawaii. The assistance includes portable jerry cans, water tanks, and transportation charges of the goods from Singapore to Tonga. The Outreach Assistance Project to Hawaii comes under Japan's International Cooperation Agency in Tonga, or JICA. Meanwhile, the United States Ambassador to Tonga, who's based in Suva, Fiji, Her Excellency Frankie Reid, requested disaster relief funds for Tonga after Hawaii was hit by the Category 5 cyclone. As a result, USAID plans to provide $50,000 to a non-governmental organization working in Hawaii to provide emergency relief commodities including water, sanitation and hygiene to support disaster-affected population. The shock of the Category 5 cyclone of some Hawaii residents is believed to hinder their capability in the cleaning up debris left behind by Tropical Cyclone Ian in the district of Foa. Emma Jane Mayer reports.
Speaking to Radio and Television Tonga's news crew while they were in Ha'apai, Pierre Olie and Demsia Nemani, FOA's district officer, Vosa Taka, says it's hard for residents to focus on cleaning up in the aftermath of the cyclone. Fortunately, a clean-up committee has been formed to do the work. This activity is led by the town officers and the bishops from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the district. The town officer for Tua, Alani Kavakiholeva, and fellow residents Lepeka Setaleke of Golo and Mapa Kuritapa says they're still in shock since the cyclone. 31 homes in Fotua were completely destroyed by Ian. About 12 houses are still standing, but they did suffer some damage. The remaining 2 houses standing in Fotua served as an evacuation centre for the people. This is the strongest cyclone that I've ever experienced in Ha'apai. The cyclone was worse than Isaac, and most of us were thinking, this is it, it's the end for us. We thank God for his protection for all our families. This is the worst cyclone I've experienced. It frightened everyone on the island. It was dark and there was dust and debris flying everywhere. The sky darkened with heavy rain and wind, and this is surely when our faith in God was tested. Foa is the largest island in the Ha'apai group of islands. It includes the villages of Whangaleonga, Fotua, Lotofoa, Ha'ateihosi'i and Whaleloa. Emma Vea for Television Tonga News.
Steps are being taken to ensure that children in a cyclone-hit island of Ha'apai will have the same access to educational opportunities as those in other parts of Tonga. Most of the schools in the Ha'apai group of islands were severely damaged by Tropical Cyclone Ian. An international organization has pledged to assist schools in Ha'apai. Emma Vea with more on its story.
The Deputy Director from the Ministry of Education and Training, Bonebate Taunsila, reveals that the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund has pledged to provide assistance to students, especially to primary school students. International organizations such as UNICEF have said they will help. They're providing help mainly for the younger students. They'll provide assistance such as reading books and textbooks. They understand that parts, if not most, of the schools were damaged. They want students in Ha'apai to have the same access to educational opportunities as those in other parts of Tonga. The Ministry of Education and Training also strives to help all the schools which were affected by the cyclone to recover from the disaster. The government will try and help all government and church schools which were affected by the cyclone. This is just like helping the future generation. The aim is for the academic year to begin on the 3rd of February. We'll be looking at stationery, and some of the schools which are located close together, like at Lifuka, maybe the primary and secondary schools there can be combined to the same building. It's nothing new for classes to be taught in tents or out in the open. The Deputy Director of the Ministry of Education adds that the assistance focuses at creating a safe environment for students so that their education will not be affected. Emma Vea for Television Tonga News.
The island of Maungaone is deemed as the worst hit island of all the Ha'apai group of islands from the Category 5 Tropical Cyclone Ian. The Adventist Development Relief Agency, or ADRA, went to the island on Monday with food supplies for the residents. Television Tonga's news reporter and cameraman Emma Jane Mea and Demsia Nemani were also sent to the island and filed this report.
Food supplies were brought to the island of Maungaone by the Adventist Development Relief Agency, or ADRA, in the aftermath of Tropical Cyclone Ian. This was brought on the Voya Savea along with boxes of survival kits from the Government Emergency Relief Committee, which is based in Bangai. Soldiers from His Majesty's Armed Forces also got off on the island to help in the clean-up activities. This is the first assistance in terms of food supplies to the people of Maungaone since it was hit by Ian a week ago. A member of ADRA, Captain Tony Fonogalaf, says this is the first such assistance of food to the cyclone victims in Maungaone.
I believe this is their first disaster relief in Tonga. So we are glad to be here. We work together closely with the Ha'apai Community Disaster Community Committee. We came in here with packets, 160 packets to be distributed, and asked the committee which area was most needed, and we were allocated Maungaone and Kauai to start with, and the rest will be distributed later in the week, maybe in Lifuka or Foa.
Reverend Sopsopo from the Seventh-day Adventist Church stressed that the ADRA assistance is directed at all victims of the cyclone and not church members only. The food supplies are rationed to last a family of 6 members for the next 2 weeks. Includes 10 kilos of flour, 5 kilos of sugar, 10 kilos of rice, 8 cans of tinned beef, and 7 tins of tuna. This is the first such assistance from ADRA, in which it has committed to provide similar assistance in the months to come. Meanwhile, the Mo'ungaone town officer, Salesi Muli, says there are 24 families, which is almost 100 people, residing on the island. He says of the 23 homes, 22 collapsed in the cyclone, leaving only 1 standing, yet it did suffer damage. The only school on the island, which is a government primary school, also collapsed, while the Church of Tonga Hall and the Free Western Church of Tonga Hall suffered much damage. Despite the damage to these church halls, they still served as refuge to the residents. Although it's been a week since the cyclone hit, residents were still tearful when they talked about it to the Television Tonga news crew in Mo'ungaone. I was in my house when the cyclone came and the winds just got stronger and it made me really scared. There are only 2 doors in the house and they faced the northern side where the cyclone was strongest. So we took out the louvers and climbed out the window and carried my grandchildren out so we could seek refuge at the Church of Tonga Hall. When the cyclone hit, I was so scared. I live alone in my house. I'm 77 years old and I've seen and lived through a lot of cyclones, but this one is the worst one of all. This happened during the day, but when it hit, it turned dark. I was so shocked when I looked out of my window and saw all the houses being blown around and into the bushes. I was taken by surprise when another house hit into my house and it collapsed. We had no idea that the cyclone would be that strong and that it could pull down houses. We stayed in the house until it started moving with the wind. When the door slammed open, we ran out of the house and it collapsed right behind us. We made our way to the closest house, but there was no one there. Then we hid next to a tank for a while until the water came up to our waist. Then we moved on and sought refuge at the church hall.
The Nuku'alofa Rotary Club Nuku'alofa has shipped emergency response kits to the Hawaii group of islands. This was confirmed to Television Tonga News by the director for the projects of the Rotary Club Nuku'alofa, Dr. Amanaki Whakokaitao. Alessio Falecano has more on that story.
The director of the Nuku'alofa Rotary Club, Dr. Amanaki Whakakovikaitao, says the assistance of emergency response kits from the Rotary New Zealand World Community Services in partnership with the Nuku'alofa Rotary Club have been shipped via the Voia Pangai to the Hawaii group of islands. The assistance was with the New Zealand Rotary Club, which helps vulnerable islands such as Samoa, Fiji, including Tonga, when a natural disaster strikes. We provide emergency response kits for victims of natural disasters. 270 kits were donated to the National Emergency Management Office on NEMO for distribution to cyclone-stricken families in Hawaii. There is no food included in this assistance. It aims at helping victims recover from the disaster. We have informed the New Zealand Rotary Club about the donation in case they want to send some more. Information from the director of the International Project of the Nuku'alofa Rotary Club, Dr. Amanaki Whakovikaitao, told Television Tonga News that this is a result of close working ties with the New Zealand Rotary Club. The emergency kits include clothing, bedding and personal hygiene, cooking and eating, amongst many other items. The kits are estimated at 162,000 New Zealand dollars. For Television Tonga News, Amanasi Falekaano.
The Ministry of Health denies a report of a diarrhea outbreak in the Hawaii group of islands. This was confirmed by the Chief Medical Officer of the Public Health Division from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Malakai Ake. Emma Jane Mayer tells you more.
The health officers on the island of Hawaii are advising residents about the importance of hygiene and sanitation. The Chief Medical Officer of the Public Health Division from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Malakai Ake, says upon receiving the report of a diarrhea outbreak in Hawaii, they contacted the doctor in charge in Hawaii to confirm it. The doctor in Hawaii reported only 5 diarrhea cases on the island during the time when these reports were made. Those reports say around 50 diarrhea patients were reported from the island. Having 10 diarrhea patients is not unusual, but if the cases reach 20 patients or more, that's when it's deemed as an outbreak. The Ministry of Health has provided supplies to help with vector control, which is a spray that kills flies and mosquitoes and their breeding areas. This is also to minimize the risk of disease. The World Health Organization and UNICEF have donated chemicals for water purification. The Ministry of Health also sent chlorine packets to the islands used to purify drinking water in the water tanks. We also advise the public to always boil the tank water and cool them before drinking. Dr. Aka adds all donation made from their development partners towards Hatbai has been transferred to the National Emergency Management Office for distribution. Emma Vale for Television Tonga News.
And that's the latest update from Hawaii. But looking at other news items, many people in Nuku'alofa were shocked when a cargo vessel called the Punalei, which is owned by the Wata Shipping Lines, caught on fire. The vessel is used to transport diesel oil. The Hifufua vessel, along with the Tonga Fire Service, responded quickly in putting out the fire. The Tonga Ports Authority Finance Manager, Alo Mailiseni, says investigation is underway to determine the cause of the fire. He also advises boat owners who have boats docked at the wharf to ensure such incidents do not occur again. The Punalei vessel has been anchoring at Whaua Wharf since 2011. A road accident which occurred along Wuna Road at Papua yesterday resulted in a temporary power shutdown for nearby areas such as Whangaroto and Papua. As a result of the crash, Tonga Power's supply bowl suffered damage. Ansi Falikano reports.
Tonga Power's head of engineering, Efitusi Ma'afu, says the damage to the vehicles were not serious. However, the damage caused to the power pole had to be fixed immediately for safety reasons. The crash happened when a van travelling from Nuku'alofa was heading to Haumakelikau, and the driver didn't turn the vehicle when it was supposed to. There was also a bus on the road which was far too close to the vehicle in front and hit the power pole that has a high voltage which controls the power of Whangaroto and Papua. As a result, a power shutdown was issued for the surrounding areas for up to 10 hours. Meanwhile, the assistant engineer for Radio and Television Tonga News, Kalifitoni Sikulu, says the AM station or Radio Tonga 1's broadcasting was also out for a few minutes due to the work that was underway. This was because Radio Tonga's 1's transmitter is located at Papua. We cannot control accidents, but we can always have to be prepared for things like unexpected power failure. This can affect our computers and other electronic equipment. Mr. Sigulu says the standby power generator was used to enable the station to continue its operation during the brief moment.
And that's the local news. Sports is up next with Sinla Thorn.
In sports, Tongan luge star Bruno Banani says the past 5 years have required a lot of sacrifice in order to achieve his dream of competing at the Winter Olympics. The 25-year-old, born for Hayasemi, sealed his place at the Sochi Games last month and will become the kingdom's first ever Winter Olympian. In 2008, he was selected by the German manufacturer Bruno Banani to change his name and take up the sport as part of a marketing stunt. Banani says it was a big decision moving to the other side of the world, away from friends and family, but the hard work has paid off. Banani, who hails from a tropical archipelago famed for its sunshine and white sandy beaches, will head for the frigid Russian resort of Sochi next year after finishing 28th out of 42 starters at a World Cup meet in Park City, Utah, comfortably making the top 38 cutoff needed to qualify, the FIL said. The luge, where competitors lie supine on a sled and barrel down an icy ditch at speeds of up to 140 kilometers per hour, is virtually unknown in Tonga, where the mean annual temperature ranges from 23 to 28 Celsius. England captain Chris Robshaw believes tackling the All Blacks in New Zealand this year would be the perfect lead-up to the World Cup. Rob Shaw is pumped at the prospect of taking on the All Blacks in their own backyard over 3 tests in June. Beating the All Blacks in 2012 and pushing them again at Twickenham last November, New Zealand won 30-22, has given England real belief that they are closing in on the world #1 team ahead of the next World Cup in England in 2015. England want the Six Nations trophy back off Wales, but Rob Shaw knows the tour down under is ticking away in the background. Stanislas Wawrinka ended Novak Djokovic's 3-year tyranny at Melbourne Park on Tuesday, winning a 5-set classic at a heavy Rod Laver Arena to sensationally dump the Serb from the Australian Open last night. Heartbroken by Djokovic in 2 5-set epics in Melbourne and the United States Open last year, the nuggety 28-year-old played out of his skin to upset his Grand Slam nemesis 2-6, 6-4, 6-2, 3-6, 9-7 in 4 thrilling hours under the center court lights. In a final set of unrelenting tension, it was the iron-willed Djokovic whose resolve finally cracked as he pushed a drop shot wide to concede match point and surrendered with a poor volley slapped into the tram lines. The Swiss's triumph was richly deserved, though, and he will meet 7th-seeded Czech Thomas Berdych in his first Melbourne Cup, or Melbourne Park semi-final rather, having pulled off a seismic defeat to shake up the men's title race. Having long lived in the shadow of compatriot Roger Federer, Wawrinka grabbed his own piece of history. Snapping Djokovic's 28-match winning sequence on tour and 25-match streak at Melbourne Park, the unshaven Swiss will also go down as the man who ended his run of 14 successive Grand Slam semi-finals. In what could be the writing on the wall for Stephen Kearney, New Zealand Rugby League has formally advertised the Kiwis' head coach role. Kearney guided the Kiwis to their 2008 World Cup triumph when he was assisted by Australian mastermind Wayne Bennett in 2010 Four Nations success. But most recently, Kearney was at the helm for the embarrassing 34-2 World Cup final demolition against Australia at Old Trafford in December last year. In front of almost 75,000 supporters, the Kangaroos scored 5 tries in one of the worst displays from the Kiwis in recent times. The NZRL is also investigating whether players misused prescription drugs, combining sleeping pills with energy drinks during the World Cup campaign. Kearney's contract ended after that tournament, and while the Brisbane Broncos assistant coach has indicated he will reapply for his position, the NZRL is clearly after a change of direction. According to the chief executive of New Zealand Rugby League, Phil Holden, he said Stephen has done a great job with the Kiwis, but this is a chance for us or them to test the market and see who else puts their hand up for the role. Mr. Holden also said that they have a big year in prospect and want a strong build-up towards what may well be a 2017 World Cup on home soil. Applications for the Kiwis coaching position close in 10 days on January 31st, with a short list of candidates to be interviewed in early February and a recommendation made to the NZRL board mid-month. And that's sports news.
And looking at the latest weather forecast, an easterly wind flow prevails over the group Forecast overnight tomorrow for Tonga. For Dontapo, Ewa and Tapai, light to moderate east to southeast winds. Many fine becoming cloudy periods with some showers tomorrow. Temperature forecast for Nuku'alofa, minimum of 25 degrees Celsius for tonight. The marine weather bulletin for Tonga, for Dontapo, Ewa and Tapai, east to southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, light to moderate seas. Any tide predictions, high tide will be at 12 midnight tonight. And that's the latest weather, but before we part, just reminding you that for more of these news items together with other stories, you can call us on 23556, check out our website, or you can join us on our Facebook page Radio Television Tonga. But before we part, here's a final look at today's top stories. Special Cabinet meeting approves for reconstruction work for homes damaged by Tropical Cyclone Ian in Hawaii beginning this year. Residents in 4 districts still in shock of the cyclone hindering the recovery process, and cargo vessel called the Punalei, which is owned by the Waka Shipping Lines, caught on fire. That's our news headlines for tonight. Wrapping up this evening's news package, I'm Fatai Fainga'au. Good evening.